want to welcome everyone for our third Republic virtual meetup. I know a few people, I'm sure, have been here before. I see a few couple names that have been to other meetups of us. We do them now on a monthly basis with different topics. We've launched our Data Republic as well. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm really glad to announce our two speakers. So the first one will be Christian Frank. Been working with both of them for quite a long time. And yeah, I'm really excited and happy to hear the talks. With this, I'll pass over to Christian.
Briefly to my person, my name is Chris Frank. I work in Cologne and I'm a freelance consultant in IT. I specialize on Kubernetes and Ranger. I normally do technical talks. I have my own meetup, but this one is non-technical and it is about remote work. I call the talk the Great Flexible Work Experiment, and that actually goes back to a post that I found on LinkedIn at the beginning of Corona. Let me give you a bit of background. In parallel to me working as an IT consultant, I also am at FOM, which is a university for people who work, and I study computer science there. Guess what a surprise. And so this actually started as an essay for university. And what kicked it off, apart from me being in the home office for about almost 20 years now, is the post that you see. I found this on LinkedIn. I'm basically saying it's like what Corona did to us is put us into a big remote work experiment. All of a sudden, everybody had to be at home, had to change their routines, and became home workers. I mean, I know that it took me a while to adjust, but with this, we got just thrust into a completely new world. And a lot of people have struggled. There was new tools, and I will try over the next half hour to summarize the findings, summarize some of the research. But the key thing is, what this did is it started the discussion whether we could enshrine remote work as a right in Germany, but also in other countries, to make sure that people can continue. So as you can probably tell, I'm quite happy with working remote, and I really would like to do my part to have it go on. So that's the start. I mean, we all had to learn how to work remotely, almost overnight. What did we struggle with? We struggled with a lot of things. One is everybody became a remote worker, whether he or she wanted or not, whether they wanted or not. In the beginning, we had a lot of network and bandwidth issues. I mean, VPNs became overcrowded, and it took a while for the corporations to actually figure out what to do. But I think we have solved that by now. Over the last month, bandwidth and network problem is not an issue anymore. So the technical side, I think we have covered pretty well. In the beginning, when there was a strict lockdown, we also had to fight with social isolation, because people who were used to go to the office to have a chit chat, and now they found themselves locked into their home around the clock for 24 hours. So there is an issue with social isolation, and what we need to deal with, and we'll get to that. There is the possibility of burnout. People tend to work harder and more when working at home. But at the same time, there's also the issue of bore out. If there's nothing to do and you have to sit in front of your computer screen for 8 hours a day, it can be extremely tedious, especially if you are a person that takes kind of validation from work, and then all of a sudden there's nothing to do anymore. There's just a screen, and then you refresh and there's still no mail. So we have to deal with burnout, and we also have to deal with bore out. And last but not least, if you're a team manager and you're managing your team remotely, that requires a completely new mindset, especially if you're used to having everybody close so they can look over their shoulders and see what they do. So now you have teams remotely. You can't see what they're doing. You can maybe see an online status, but that's all. So it requires a completely new mindset when you want to manage remote teams, especially over a long period of time. So what is the prime resource that we can go to is we can actually look at the companies that have been doing all remote work for a long time. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but there is Automatic, which is the company that runs WordPress. They are an all remote company. There is Buffer, Creative Commons itself. That's the company who runs the organization that runs the Creative Commons licenses. Dropbox has a good library of resources. And then there's, of course, Giant Swarm, our own Giant Swarm, which is an all-remote company headquartered here in Cologne. GitLab is a big company that's remote. And Trello. I mean, you get the slides afterwards, and you can actually go to the links yourself. But what I would like to do is very briefly share some of their pages. If you haven't done so, the one thing that I want to really show is the enormous wealth of resources that companies like Buffer have put out. They have a complete guide how to deal with communication, how do you deal with language. Creative Commons has a very strong page on how to build remote workplaces that are inclusive. On the work in progress blog by Dropbox is a wealth of information. And I'm not going to go through all of these because that would kind of boast the time. The one thing that if you haven't read is the GitLab. GitLab has a complete guide on how to start work as a remote employee, how to adjust to work from home, how to manage. It's enormously valuable. You get the slides afterwards, and in the slides are all the links that you need. These are the companies that I've looked through. They have all very, very good resources. Let me try to kind of distill what they're telling us and mix this with my own experience. Key is a change in communication practices. And the one thing that I found helps most, and is also covered by literature, is you need to do asynchronous communication. Because if people not work in the same room anymore, you need to be able to have communication that works if it's not synchronous, meaning I post a question and someone else answers within an hour or two or within a day. That is very different from working in an office. So the first big change when you go all remote is to live with asynchronous communication. But still, you need regular touch points. That could be a stand-up. If you're agile, I would really, really recommend using video. It's a huge difference whether you see each other or whether you just hear the voice. You can, with using video, you can show your hands, you can show your facial expression, and you can engage with someone. Highly recommended. And now that we have solved the bandwidth problems, we should all be able to do video meetings. What also everybody has said is that do coffee break meetings, do meetings without a purpose. We do that in one of the customers that I work with. We regularly have coffee breaks. We meet for an espresso for half an hour, for an hour, to talk about non-working stuff. It really makes a big difference. If you communicate asynchronous over a period of time, a week or two, people tend to lose touch. So if you get people together using video regularly, once per week, in a social setting, like around the proverbial coffee pot or espresso machine, it makes a huge difference and helps morale. Unfortunately, the next thing is it's a bit more serious, because what we need to do is we need to focus on diversity and inclusion when we do remote. It's so easy to, when you lose touch, when you're not in the same room, it's so easy to speak bad about someone else, to turn people down. So It's also, especially with Corona, there's also a significant issue with hate speech, and I'm going to share some resources on that in the next couple of slides. Last but not least, if you do go remote for Corona or for forever, trust your coworkers and enable flexible scheduling. What do I mean with this? When you're in the office, there is a hard break point. You get into the office, it's 9 a.m., you sit down, you work, and then at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or 10 p.m., you go home. So there's work time and home time. When you work from home, you will probably work 2 hours in the morning, bring the kids to school, do lunch, do your laundry, and work another 6 hours. So what you need is flexible schedules to make this work, to mix your family life and your work life. And that implies that the people in the team need to trust each other. And also the employer needs to trust the employees, of course, so that you can actually make the most out of the remote work. And the most is actually being able to have a flexible schedule and dissolve the barriers between work and life. Not only actually do work-life balance. I mean, when I was in my beginning of my career, work-life balance was a big topic. If you work from home and you have a flexible schedule, you can actually mix work and life and make it one, which is something, especially in our job, that I see is an enormous benefit as a knowledge worker. Inclusive language. There is and again, I can only ask you to review the guides. There's a very good guide from the Time's Up Foundation, how to demonstrate leadership in the times of the crisis and make sure that you have equity, meaning treat your people equally and fairly, they have diversity, and make also sure in the way you talk, you include everybody on the call. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, we also see a rise in hate speech. We have a president in a country that calls it the Chinese virus, which is most definitely not good for anybody of Asian descent. So again, the United Nations have put out a document, the guidance on COVID-related hate speech. Make sure that in the team meetings that you run, you do take care about how the communication it is. It's so much easier, and we all know this from social media. It's so much easier if you're not in the same room to enter disparaging comments, to kind of belittle people, to make sexist comments. It's so much easier if you're not in the same room. So as facilitators, as people who know how it works, it's up to us to actually improve and work for it. This also goes for gender neutral language, which is it's a very interesting thing. It works. I mean, if we're looking at the English language, and this is an English language talk, what you can do is you can use they and them instead of he and she. There is very good scientific literature on it, why this makes sense. It also makes sense for us to put our preferred pronouns in our bios and the signatures. German, it works a bit different. It's because simply it's a different language, but there is a very, very good resource for German, Genderleicht, which is run by a couple of journalists, which gives the hints on how to do gender neutral language in German. And we also know from Scandinavia that it does work. In Scandinavia, in Sweden, they have introduced a new pronoun and took over the role of the old he and she. And it actually changes. There are studies that it does change culture. And if you do want to communicate gender neutral, if you do want to kind of be a bit more aware of sexist comments, it does work. German, Genderleicht, or if you want to read it up, how it works in Sweden, I put the link down here. And it's very good to read, because language shapes the way you think. And if you stop thinking about, for example, him and her, but start thinking about they, it does make a huge difference. And it makes a huge difference in a group, and especially remote, because it, like we know from social media, it is so easy to do bad comments, down-putting comments when you're not face-to-face. But it's not only communication. There is a huge impact for the environment. It's very simple. It's obvious, but let me state it again. If you don't commute, you don't pollute. Well, of course, if you bike to work, you don't pollute, but a lot of people actually drive to work. And I do have a colleague who actually drives from almost the west of Germany to about 70 kilometers and then spends the whole day in phone conferences. I do a virtual note. The person is on the call. And if you don't, I mean, there's such a huge benefit for the environment if you do not commute. It has more, and one thing that we currently see in the, especially in the Silicon Valley, is it gives access to affordable housing. If you don't need to be close to your workplace anymore, because you're not having to clock in every day, you can go where living is cheaper, or you can go. I mean, I love living in the inner city, so I live in the city, but I could literally work all over the world right now. So by decoupling the space you live and the place you work, it's beneficial for a lot. It takes, especially in cities, because I am a city dweller, it takes the pressure of the inner cities because you don't need that much space for offices anymore. You can actually start to support your local communities by being at home, working, going out for lunch in the local places. You can support the local business by asking for food there. So it's a huge benefit for the community if you live where you work, and you live not only where you work, but also you live where you like to live, and just virtually travel to work regardless. So this, again, together with the flexible schedule, this gives us the ability to decouple our private lives from the rigors of the office and still work and still be productive, but I can work on my own schedule and I can be in the place that I like. That's such an increase in quality of life that I really, really hope. I mean, COVID is most definitely, I mean, there are benefits, let me put it this way, there are benefits of the current crisis. And we can take these benefits, especially we as an IT, as a knowledge workers, we can take the benefits and turn them really into something important for us. What else is important? As soon as you start being locked in, well, we've covered the environmental aspects, we have covered communication. Now we need to cover our own mental health and also our physical health. Because what happens when you start working from home all of a sudden, and there is also a lockdown, and to partially, at least in here, we still have, you lose a lot of opportunities, natural opportunities to move. And moving, I'm not talking about like physical and exercising, is important to stay sane. There are many ways what you can do, and it's important for the mental health, but also for the physical health. I found the cheapest fitness application that I found over COVID is Pokemon Go, because it gets me out of the office or out of the flat at least once. And I've started since COVID, I've never walked that many hours before. Because one thing is my normal routines, like going to the shops, going to the customer, going to the office, going to the cinema, going out, they're all gone, right? It's been replaced with I go sit in front of my computer, and instead of going to a cinema, I sit in front of Netflix. So there is a need to actually make a conscious effort to get out and move. Whether it's Pokemon Go or whether it's whatever, Fitbit, a membership in the gym, whatever. Everybody is different, but it is important to have an element of self-care and mental hygiene to offset the loss of movement and the loss of radius. And it's not only the loss of physical, it's also the loss of travel. I mean, I love travel and I love watching other places. what can I do? One is I can get the world to come into my room, and there are numerous wonderful webcams out there, like this Tokyo Live camera. So if you feel like the travel bug bites and you feel like, oh, I need to go and see other places, well, sometimes I just sit there and work and have Tokyo in the background. And there are millions. These are just examples. Yeah. So these are kind of the two main things that I do to stay sane, so to speak, during lockdown. Is I try to travel virtually and I try to exercise locally. Yeah, these are my two main helpers for this. So now we come to the interesting part. How do we get back to the office? Do we need a return strategy? And even more, do we want a return strategy? Spoiler is no. Why do I say no? It's like, do we really want to get back into the office? Maybe sometimes, but do I want to get back to 5 days, 8 to 5? No. If you have moved to a complete remote environment, then yes, you probably need a strategy to return, because you need to get the people gradually to get back into the office. Some companies have completely redecorated their offices, like put transparent dividers between the workspaces and reduce the number of people on the same floor. So you definitely need a return strategy if you want the people to come back to the office. But the big question is, what's the benefit of coming back to the office? And I would kind of argue that there is a huge benefit. There is a benefit in socializing, but if you do it properly, you can socialize virtually. So do we need a return strategy? Probably yes, if you really want to return. Do we want a return strategy? Personally, I think, no, we don't want a return strategy. I would like to continue. And I would like to continue this even after Corona, and really use this to change the way we work. Which kind of gives me also, and it's not only work. This is a very interesting tweet I found from Brian Niles on Twitter, who basically is saying, like, why do we not only why do we drop the work? Why don't we also drop events? And it's kind of an interesting thought. It's like, why do we had the virtual KubeCon ended a couple of days ago. It's like, why do we actually need virtual events? Why don't we go and record our tech talks and release them as they happen on our own schedule? We can do full write-ups and release them on a website. We actually don't need these tech events. I mean, I love them, so it's kind of hard to say this, but do we really need these tech events? We could simply just go out and release our information, release our material as it happens, and just take also this, if we get rid of this notion that we need to be physically together, an enormous possibilities open up. I'm absolutely good in time. So let me summarize. My firm belief is home office is here to stay. And I believe it, and I also hope for it. Because the big question, especially in our line of work, and I fully understand that it's not true for a cashier, it's not true for a frontline health worker, but in our place of work, it's like, why do we have to go to work when work can easily come to us? I mean, all we do is we produce knowledge, we write stuff, we write code, we maintain web pages, we write nice markup documents. There is no need for a physical location at all. So if we understand this, the huge question is, why do people have to go to work? Why doesn't we just simply have the work come to the people? And I think that's something I hope society will change. I believe that diversity and inclusion is absolute key for a good remote work. We need to be very, very careful about how we communicate, what we communicate, and make sure that we are respectful. There is on a lot of websites, you see the term like be excellent to each other. And I think, yes, we should be excellent to each other, especially remote. There is a huge difference between remote work and distributed work. There is a whole set of research on it, what makes the difference between just people being at home and actually having distributed work that can travel through time zones. Remote work will need a change of attitude. Yes, it needs very good tooling. There's tons of tools out there. It starts with Slack. There is a tools called Threads that people, I think people in Slack or Trello wrote, which allows fully asynchronous meetings. There is a very interesting tool that's very recent. I saw it's Sokoko, where we have virtual rooms where you actually meet by putting your little avatars in little rooms. I mean, there's so much out there. Just pick something that works for your team. In closing, I would really like for us take the momentum, take the impetus that the chances that digitalization and COVID brought us. Let's take it, go forward, and change the way we work. With that said, a half hour is over. I will share my set card, which is basically all my talks and everything else, Wiki, GitHub and stuff. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. Are there any questions from the audience, maybe?
I have a question. Yeah, I totally agree with all the points you said, that we can, I think at least should replace a lot of meetings with virtual meetings. But in the last couple of months, I didn't really experience a good brainstorming or strategy development meeting virtually. Regardless the tool, whatever you use, right? So there are a lot of tools. It's not a tool, it's this kind of, everybody is behind this screen and cannot articulate and the gestics. And what have you any really good experience kind of brainstorming creative meetings virtually? Would you like to share?
Yes, I mean, I've run a couple of workshops. So what can I say? Is I use Scrumler for this, which is a tool by Innovex, but there's others. There's Miro, there's Mural, but it's not a tool question. It's absolutely not a tool question. I think the key is, from my point of view, is video. You need to see each other so that you can read the visual clues, and you need to have someone who likes what he's doing or she or they doing. I mean, it's a question of if you love what you're doing, if you love presenting online, it's easy to motivate the others. It's not a question of tools, but I'm particularly fond of Scrumler because they have because you can do all the things like voting, stacking cards, and do funny stuff like in Agile. And my experience is, yes, you can run good workshops, but it takes practice. It takes practice, and again, I believe video is.
I would like to mention I am also in a meetup group in Stuttgart, which is called Design Sprints or something, where they meet at the moment very often also via online because other option is not available. And with that, I was involved in some interesting discussions where they used all these tools, for example, Mural, Miro. But you can see also it's also without any cost. You can see how it works live. And some of you have some ideas. You can join, you can work with them, and you see how it works. I agree fully with Christian that this is can do a lot remote with this kind of approaches, attitude. Or the size of the group should be not too many. Even in these examples, there are 20 or 30 or sometimes more, but you get a feeling about it. And yeah, it's a very interesting meetup group in Stuttgart, and they are now also online connected with the world.
I have a question regarding the versus remote work and going to the office, right? So it's about how to build a non-formal relationship between colleagues, right? So when you go to the office, so you have to build some strong relation with the colleague, right? So you share coffee, you can share some jokes, and especially if you work within a team, so you can build some affinities with some members. And the challenging is how we can build non-formal relation between colleagues, right? So if you go to the office, I mean, for example, for 1 week, you can start to see relationships built between the members while working on your remote, so you can work for a long time, and it's still there is this barrier and frontier between them. And building a non-formal relation, it's very important for teams, right?
The big difference is, from my experience, is you have to especially make room for informal meetings. That could be a weekly coffee talk, a place where you can actually meet and not talk about work. The thing that in an office that happens automatically, because you stand up, you go to the coffee machine and you meet. Remote, you need to formalize this. That's at least my experience, and again, I can say from some customers it works. If you set aside some time every week to speak and meet in video, it's slower, yes, but it works. But it needs a conscious effort. If you just start doling out job assignments and then not meet people, the group will never cohese.
Like we used to do as well, like weekly coffee meetings for like half an hour in our team, where we were basically not talking about work. And I think everyone, especially in the beginning of the lockdown, really enjoyed that. Like you could really see how the people were just, lightening up again, and like we were really happy to see each other, and not only during our daily stand-ups where everyone was talking about their day and what they were doing, but just about what happened like in their personal life. Let's move on to Clodagh with her talk.
Perfect. I like that last comment, by the way, about starting the day with talking about your personal life, because I think that was the one thing for me. For me, the whole thing was a bit strange, because I'm changing jobs at the moment. So I got stuck in Germany when I was supposed to move to London in February. So I got to see this from a not working perspective, but an interviewing perspective. And I'll explain why I have a lot of interest in it. To really start at the beginning, hello. My name is Clodagh Durkan, and thank you for listening to me. I come from a background where I spent a lot of my life building these solutions. I started in the network center in Vodafone. I was the only woman, only girl at the time. So it's never been a big problem for me. And I've always been at 4 o'clock in the morning in the data center, fixing something to connect the BSCs to the different centers and doing the IP architecture. So designing networks and network access has always been the key thing that I've done. And then you see like COVID happening, and it goes down into the crisis management that we've always had to do in telecoms, because we always had to make sure we're very resilient and we can always give our customers service. In particular, it showed how much, I specialize in security, specifically in security engineering, and it showed how important it is, not just for blocking viruses, but for the type of security that I do, which is about network security. How do you give safe access remotely into the network from different locations and different devices, and any device, any access, any time lands that we live in at the moment. So it's a fascinating topic. I was looking at what the Big Four have to say about the results of the crisis. We particularly look at the industry trends for security budgets, particularly in these times, because it can be quite expensive to protect companies against these huge threats, and also these huge fines that the ICO are doling out now. So big ones with BA and Marriott last year, and that the criminals are getting even more inventive, and it's always the old tricks that are getting past everybody. So because of the COVID and seeing how much benefit the security equipment gave, it enabled it. Like everything that we do in crisis management became the backbone of that crisis response. So even though this was the ultimate crisis response, we had never really modeled this except in the extreme modeling cases. Like nobody'd ever thought this would ever happen, that everybody was working off site at the same time. Nobody. Like we do crisis management, crisis modeling of what happens if a department goes down or if a building burns down. But you don't think of the whole world, everybody working from home at the same time. And I come from Vodafone, like you're going, oh my God, what is the network going to act like? What's going to happen? It's bad enough for Christmas or New Year's Day. We model everything on New Year's Day. So you want to make sure New Year's Eve that SMS goes through within seconds. So everything is totally capacitized for that, with the intention that you're sizing it to that everybody who owns a phone or a device is going to send a text, at least one text at the same time. And can you manage that on the network? And that's one of the biggest challenges. And to be quite honest, I'm very impressed with the telcos. They survived quite well. And I was talking to the CIO of Orange in the UK, and he was saying it was because of that New Year's thing. So that New Year's Day thing saves the telecoms, because all of that capacity that they reserved just for New Year's Eve actually helped them to breathe a bit. You know, there was challenges, of course, but they had that little bit of space where they could have a bit of time to shore up the defenses. Now that's okay, like in a first world country like Germany or the UK, but what happens in the rest of the countries where maybe the infrastructure isn't so good? Like everybody was working from home at the same time. And I had a really interesting take in this whole thing, because in Germany, I think the first, just right now the timeline here, like our first real case was the 29th of February. Then by the 3rd of March, the 29th of February we got in Italy, and then by the 2nd of March we had about 60 people, I think, in Germany. 3 of them in the hospital beside my house in Dusseldorf, like literally 10 minutes walk down around the corner. Global pandemic, nobody knew what was going on. I know that there's cases, one of the few cases in Germany, because North Rhine-Westphalia was one of the key places from all of those people coming back from Italy. And they brought them to the hospital in my backyard. And then on the 2nd of March, I got a call from my sister saying my dad was in hospital in Ireland. So I had to go back home. So I got a flight on the morning of the 3rd, and I pulled out one of my masks, because this famous N95 mask is I actually have a lot of them. My family is medical. My dad's a dentist, my brother's a dentist. I use them for sanding and painting. So I actually had 2 in my cupboard, and I used one to go back on the plane. I had to go through Gatwick on the way back to Ireland. So I didn't like the idea of bringing any germs home to my dad, who was in an ICU in the west of Ireland. I thought with heart failure at the time, because he has problems with his heart, and I knew there was a global pandemic, I had this case around the corner, so I wasn't going to take any chances. And I had spent some time in Ghana as well. I've worked in 4 different countries, and one of them was Africa. In Ghana, we had a lot of malaria, we had a lot of meningitis, we also had a lot of typhoid when rainy season came. So you learn very quickly about the sanitation aspects. My best friends were in an NGO that did toilets for Ghana. So you learn very quickly about the important simple things. Washing your hands, not spreading any germs anywhere, not breathing on people, not letting people breathe on you. So the mask was a perfect common sense aspect of what I should wear going home to make sure I didn't bring anything home to Dad. Now, luckily he was fine. He got the full MOT just before everything kind of kicked off. And it was really at the very start, so he was very lucky. I was over there when the hospitals closed. The hospitals closed down on the 8th of March. So that's only within the 8th. So within 5 days of me coming home, the hospitals had closed down for visitors. So all of my aspects of wearing the mask, they were useless because I couldn't go anywhere. And I'd actually gotten attacked on the way home by a guy going back to the army from Ireland, who was on the same flight as me, who said, like, "Oh, why are you wearing that mask? You know, you're stupid, you're just trying to cause panic." And I was like, my dad's in ICU. My dad's in ICU, like, that's the only reason. I'm not trying to panic anybody. I do crisis management. I know this. Not to keep people calm. But I just don't want to bring any weird germs home to my dad. And that was kind of really the start of really the weird aspects of how people react to this kind of crisis. Like, people really didn't know what was going on. People are scared. They're scared because they're between different countries. Like this guy, he was leaving his 80. I actually walked with him a little bit longer through the airport, and it turns out that his mother in Ireland was sick. She was 82, and he was scared to death of something happening to her when he was going back to the Lebanon or Afghanistan or wherever he was posted. So it was scared, but he was really aggressive at the time of telling me I was a stupid idiot for wearing a mask. We've unfortunately seen a lot of that, and it is because people are scared, you know, they don't know what's going on. So when I was over there in the hospital in west of Ireland, they closed down to all visitors. Our president is a doctor, Leo Varadkar, so he very early worked to do mitigation. I think himself and Merkel worked very well together, which was great. So they put in very stringent protections for the people in hospitals at the very, very start. This is kind of like what we're looking at from before. This was like the pre-March typical office, everybody talking to each other and eating and, you know, sharing stuff. And then suddenly after that, March the 10th, I think it was March the 12th in Ireland, when everything completely shut down. And then suddenly people didn't know what they were going to do. Because hospitals were shut down, I actually came back to Germany on the 10th of March. I came through Amsterdam because I was doing an interview with a Dutch company, and they didn't believe anything about the pandemic. They didn't think anything was going to happen. They had no crisis plans. They had no plans for everybody working off site. It's very typical for most companies. They thought the whole thing was stupid. It was just completely overblown. And actually by the evening of the 10th, they'd announced that Amsterdam were going to lockdown. So I actually sent messages to their lawyer to help them, and then a couple of quick hit procedures to the HR people. Like, number one, just please reassure your people to be calm. You know, it's not the end of the world. It just hasn't happened before. Because nobody had anything written for this, or they hadn't really taken it seriously before this. And the systems also had never thought of everybody having to work from home at the same time. So I gave them advice on, you know, maybe think about how this is going to work in the future. Stay home for maybe a couple of weeks until we see where we are. And there was actually very good learning for me. Like, I know I'm seeing it from the outside, but people adapted very, very quickly. I think primarily because there was this existence of work from home schemes in a lot of companies. Like a lot of people who had kids were opting, especially in Germany, opting to work at home like once or twice a week. And the increased use of cloud solutions and bring your own device in companies, especially in the last couple of years, has definitely helped. And as well, I mean, most people at this stage have internet in their houses. I mean, they do in Germany anyway. This is actually a question or a problem in the rest of the world, because very often people don't have internet. They don't have easy internet. They have maybe very basic internet. I know when I was a student, I was actually working in a telco, and I didn't have internet at home. I just used my phone because my phone was free. So I had mobile internet, but that wouldn't have been enough if I had to work from home as well. So a lot of people were trying to work with the telecoms to get new solutions, you know, maybe evaluating what equipment that they had. A lot of people, it's a big thing in Germany that a lot of many companies actually separate out work and personal phones. So you maybe be only given a very restricted work phone, and your more functional phone may tend to be your personal Android or your tablet, but that may not have the ability to connect onto company resources. So people very quickly found out what worked and what didn't, and then tech departments had to come up with new solutions to enable this, everybody working from home multinationally and working with these international video conferences with all these different sites as well. And then we quickly came to this situation, which is, I just remember, I just laughed so much when I saw this, because it really did remind me of all those Zoom calls that I was on. And I really liked it at the beginning. So there was a question about how the collaboration, and one thing that I really liked was, I don't know how many of you were involved in some of the European hackathons that happened during the summer. They really started kicking off in April. April was really, really strong for them. I did one there was a Berlin health hackathon around at Easter, and the EU had a huge hackathon. And they're not hackathons as such as I traditionally would know them coming from security, but they were more like innovathons about people coming up with solutions. How do we do new procurement solutions to, create gowns through companies that traditionally had manufactured sheets? Can we change anything? Can we change any of this equipment to manufacture something else? And there was a huge amount of brilliant ideas and some really, really stupid ones as well. But this EU versus virus was an initiative by the innovation minister, and there was actually 20,000 participants at a weekend in April. So 20,000 participants all using the same Slack, all VCing in at the same time, came up with 2,000 plus ideas. I think it's about 2,300 ideas. Like everything from solutions to restart tourism to creating new solutions for healthcare. How can you fix these PPE problems? It was for me, it was really good because I like this. When there's a problem, I like to address it by working on something. So this for me was very good for my head because I got to create things and work with other people as well. And that was probably the biggest benefit. You got to work with people from across Europe and see what challenges they were having in their individual companies or their individual towns. Particularly at that time, I was talking with a lot of people from Italy who were really seeing problems on the ground. And it was really helping them because they'd been stuck inside for like nearly a month at that stage. So it was letting them get out and have a normal environment virtually. So it was brilliant. For me, I was just telling everybody to join because it was so enjoyable to meet everybody who were just delighted to talk to normal people and to be working on a challenge that was maybe kind of helping, but it was more helping people's mental state because it was getting innovative and creative people to work on a challenge that they could do something about from inside their house and working on it with an international team as well. Like, there was no financial reward or anything. It was all about the ideas, and that was very rewarding in itself. Like, it was looking across a couple of different areas. It was looking at like health and life categories, like business continuity, social and political cohesion, remote working and education, digital finance. And there was really cool ones. I mean, one of the funniest ones was sewers for COVID. These were guys that actually worked on a sewer emission monitoring project before, and they proposed a solution to actually check for COVID using the sewer runoff, which, if you think about it, makes perfect sense because it's excreted through the waste products, from the water and the other. So actually doing monitoring, not just of, what's the increase in condoms in Oktoberfest, but actually looking at sampling the waste and seeing, well, what kind of bacteria can we see here? Is there an increase in certain areas? So are we seeing an increase in COVID, within certain areas of Germany? And how's it traveling? So it was a very, very, they weren't just made up solutions. These were actually bringing together people who'd worked in the area before, in some cases. In some other cases, people just wanted to help. But there was some nice ideas that went on for further discovery. And you had like great guys at Quran who did this around the detection of masks by machine learning. So he was looking at analyzing camera footage to check what people were wearing. So there's all these kind of innovative new ways of using technology to help with the crisis that was happening. Me coming from data security, I'll talk about it again in a little bit, but to be honest, all of the work we did on GDPR, all the work we did around data security and anti-phishing attacks, the number one rule of crisis management is you protect the people. You protect the people, you keep everybody else calm. It doesn't matter what you lose, you'll recover, but you just need to protect the people. And then, so you do that first of all, as your number one priority, and then you can work on the second things like, well, can they connect? Can the teams talk to each other? Can they collaborate? How are they collaborating? How much can they work on? What's realistic? What's not realistic? And what do we need to make sure that we keep an eye on so that we can go back and look at it later? And I think most companies did that part quite well. There is, of course, there was challenges. Not everybody is ideal work from home situations. Not everybody is a home office. Not everybody has good internet at home. they may not have any quiet place in the house near the router. They may just have Wi-Fi in their house, and it might be shared between like 3 kids that are streaming and another one that's playing whatever games are popular these days, plus all this on-demand Disney that was happening at that time. And also kids at home are quite tough, you know. They need attention all the time. Like my nephews are in the west of Ireland, and they had probably blissful COVID because they're right by Kilray Fjord, right in the west of Ireland. They spent their time fishing and swimming and, you know, helping their granddad out on the farm because he's next door. They've decided they didn't want to go back to school because you don't need to go to school if you want to drive a tractor. So those guys had a great time. But if you think of kids in, you know, stuck in really built up areas, I mean, that must have been really tough for parents and really tough for the kids as well when they couldn't come out. So the mental challenges, not just of the isolation, but also keeping people calm was quite a challenge for everybody, I think. Now we're going to have a look at some of the technology that actually really helped at the time. So I was quite involved in like this, the bring your own device technologies and this mobile device management. So putting in solutions where you could centrally manage all of your tablets and mobile devices, Androids and Apples, laptops, PCs, and you could manage them all from one place, which is something that we call mobile device management, which most of you will know. And so, and another part of that was Microsoft. I must say, Microsoft's propositions have been a godsend. With the increasing move to Office 365, a lot of companies have moved to store all their data on OneDrive. So it meant that if they had to leave their laptop or their desktop in the office, they could work off an Office 365 account in the worst case scenario off their home PC. There was options for doing that. It's not ideal to be honest, but the Office 365 security is fairly robust security. So people could still work and they could still access their emails. Data loss prevention and GDPR are two quite big themes. People were trying to get solutions to just solve for the challenges at hand, you know. They you know, this is pure crisis management, and not a lot of people have done this. So they use, even now, like I go down to my local coffee shop in the morning to read the paper, and I'm given a piece of paper to sign my name and my email address and my telephone number. Being very compliant, I of course put the correct ones there, but I don't know where that stuff goes. And we spent so long putting in GDPR back in 2018, where this is quite a no-go, writing this down on paper, because it's not a credit card, but it is an identifier, and it's an identifier that can track you. And it's a physical security identifier. So if the wrong person gets their hands on it, they can profile your movement, which is one thing that as physical security you try to make sure that nobody can do unless you want them to. So if I leave a trail of these, I mean, I quite like having coffee, and when it was really hot, I was going to a cup of them around my house, and you know, you suddenly establish a pattern, and if you are in a at-risk profession, or if you're CEO or CTO, or more importantly the CFO, and you start establishing these patterns around this place with these pieces of paper that you're giving to a minimum wage person behind a bakery counter, you know, suddenly you have to think of, like, you know, well, what is my control of my data? I'm not so sure that it's so well done. If every business that was starting to open across Europe did it in the same way. I'm hoping, I'm not completely convinced now that those pieces of paper will be shredded. I actually don't believe it at all. I think they'll all be shoved in bins. And yeah, I mean, there is definitely going to be a piece of work to carry out afterwards to just check, you know, what we put in place. What we put in place for putting in solutions very quickly, and what we put in place for doing, you know, workarounds for the crisis management solutions. So how do you track people? So back in 2018, these were like some of the key security challenges, like, you know, lack of budget, lack of stakeholders, inadequate ability of professionals, a legacy infrastructure and solutions, inadequate security staffing, increasing sophistication of threats, and like this was a year after WannaCry, so we still had problems at that stage. And then the end of 2018, that's when GDPR came in, and we had to focus on the legal side of it. So security budgets, they started really going up when those first big fines started happening in 2019. Then suddenly security was getting a lot of attention because it was hitting the CEOs in their pocket. And now COVID came along, and all of the technology that security teams are putting in for control of staff, or for enabling staff access to data, controlling the access to data, or for allowing for multinational access to data. The security teams were very much right at the center of that whole data transformation. Yeah, there was, you know, the people were going out find, you know, if they didn't have, I mean, not everybody is Vodafone or you know, a Deloitte or Pricewaterhouse. Not everybody has proper remote access solutions. So there's a lot of, you know, free ones. I mean, remote PC, so Assist, Log Me In, TeamViewer is a very good one as well. Nice little unicorn down near Göppingen, I think, or down near Munich. Splashbox is another one that I've seen a lot of people using. We also saw a lot of companies giving very good deals for access. Cloudflare in particular were a very good company, and so they waived the price during COVID, and they gave a free 30-minute session and help with onboarding. I mean, of course it's a sales pitch, but it was actually very helpful for companies that were crying out for solutions. And Cloudflare are like world leading in what they do in terms of proxying internet traffic for companies. With the increase in traffic, there's multiple different statistics in this. I just like this one because it's right at the beginning. This is like from the 19th of March, looking at the Deutsche CIX in Frankfurt. There was a 10% increase in average data traffic, 9.1 terabits per second data throughput, 50% increase in video conferencing traffic. And this was only the 19th of March. Most people were still sorting out their laptops at this stage. There's 25% increase in online and cloud gaming. That surprised me, being a girlfriend of a gamer and seeing how much he succumbed himself in gaming. And it was, you know, I was so proud of the telcos. I just thought they did an absolutely amazing job of keeping everything up and running and everybody connected as well, because we relied on them. We really relied on them for our internet, for our inter-country connectivity as well. The Zoom is a good case in point, because one of the companies who, with Tesla, you would have been done very well to have invested in the beginning. I think Zoom had the biggest amount of marketing, both from positive and negative. We had all the Zoom bombing incidents when people were cutting in on corporate Zoom things. And that really was the corporate's own fault. They shouldn't have been using Zoom, because anybody could get into a Zoom meeting, or could at that time, with just having the link. And whereas more corporate solutions, you would have to have a corporate account. But Zoom did really well. It back in March, April, it reported like a 3,000% growth. Not bad. Coming out of that EU versus virus and the Berlin virus hackathon, other solutions like Jitsi actually came up as a big one that people were using for free, which works actually quite as well because there's not so much traffic on it. Again, this is probably a little bit out of sequence, so this is looking at the investment priorities back in 1819. So people were looking at cloud computing, cybersecurity and analytics, mobile, Internet of Things is always a big thing, blockchain, of course, biggest thing that nobody really knows what it's doing. But what you don't really see here is looking at that shoring up the perimeter access, you know, looking at solutions like Zscaler or porting all your traffic from your device, all your internet traffic from your PC back to your network so that you're inspecting all the traffic, which is something I've mentioned Zscalers only because I like the solution and what they do, because you can send all of the device traffic back to your own network inspection to clean it first, which kind of helps you to ensure that you're not infected with anything as well. So this is I found a very good paper by Ernst & Young. I can send it on to you guys. It basically just saying, you know, with remote working, there was an awful lot of phishing incidents. There was a lot of, you know, people weren't paying as much attention. They were maybe not going through the same solutions when they were working remotely that they were when they were working on the LAN. It's also saying that larger corporations were able to ride out the storm more comfortably than mid-sized. That could be because they had more people. They had more people who were there to able to support as well. It's my suspicion. And you know, the Ernst & Young were also talking about the budgets. I mean, the budget I think is a big question for everybody. People are still breathing, trying to see what's going to happen next, and everybody's just waiting to hire new people until they get all of their own people back on site again. Enough furlough. Furlough, I don't think is a word used in Germany. It was a word used in England, where people were put on not 100% working. So, yeah, you know, typical. It said it caused significant disruption to day-to-day security operations. Well, you know, no guess on that one. 79% say that budgets will be impacted by COVID-19 in the next 6 months, not sooner. I expect they're going to be impacted in the next month or two. I expect now that senior management are going to really realize the benefit of security now and the reality of crisis forecasting, which we need to do. And not everybody in security does it. The guy who looks after your antivirus solution or your web filter doesn't really have to do any forecasting of crisis management or like resilience capacity. Identity and access management, data protection, privacy, priorities, nice words from security. And of course, remote working support was the biggest challenge due to of course. Data privacy. Now, data privacy, I have another aspect on this because, as I said, one of the main tenets in security is like you're not going to stop people working. The number one priority is keep people safe, keep people motivated as well, and you want to make sure you've got a happy workforce. Okay? Yes, everybody's working from home, but you need to come up with creative and innovative solutions that pulls them out of their depression if they're depressed, or makes them feel that they're still wanted, makes them feel that the company still thinks it's going to survive in the next 6 months, and that it has a very forward-thinking outlook into the market. I mean, some of the data security challenges we did see, I mean, of course, there was secret information going over non-approved challenges, big challenge, because people were working from home. They didn't necessarily have access into the secret channel that was in the office. Most, they've said sensitive data at home. A lot of people might be printing out on their home printers and not having shredders at home as well. Or they'd have those really crappy home shredders. And I have one. I can't use it at all. I have to bring all my stuff into a big shredder down at the local print shop to do whenever I do a Marie Kondo clean out of all my paper. So there's a lot of people who are still working from home who have a lot of sensitive information, sensitive emails printed out, who now need to carry all of that paper back into the office. And I wonder how many of them will actually do that. Or are they just going to all shove them into the paper molds? So I kind of suspect, I hope not. I hope most people are sensible enough that they will bring it back into the office. But it depends on how long people are still going to be working from home for. There's also the physical thing of having a home office. You know, when I don't know how it works here, but when you have a home office in Ireland, one of the HR people will come out to your house and they'll do a site assessment. They'll see that your table is high enough, that the chair is correct. If it's not ergonomic enough, they'll buy you a chair, because of course they don't want you to get back problems working in your home office. Or you can claim it off the company, or you can claim it off the tax. You need to make sure that you're in an area that can't be overlooked by the neighbours. so not sitting with your back to a window. You know, there's all these kind of physical security aspects to it. And it's also, I mean, there's no difference than if you're in the office. If you have equipment, you have it locked up somehow. If you have a laptop, you have one of those cable ties and you have it secured to something, just in case somebody breaks into your house or your kids want to take it and bash it on the ground. If you have USB keys, you don't have sensitive data on it, and that can be stolen, etc., etc. So it's all the same kind of security, just slightly different focus. And there's also things, you know, not, you know, it's a basic thing. We live in a global economy with all the outsourcing that's happened in the last couple of years to China and to places like Romania. I think in the new ones is Brazil for follow the sun aspects. I know that Cloudflare use Portugal and Brazil. So not all staff live in proper houses. They don't all live in, you know, highly connected, high-tech environments. They don't live with really good internet. As I was saying, like I was working in Ghana, and I had great internet, but it was really expensive. So my staff couldn't afford internet, or they'd have it shared with a couple of people to make the cost less, because it was something like $100 a month. Something that I think here is like €10 a month. So $100 a month was a huge expense for the Canadian team. GDPR, I just wanted to put this in because we can't forget it. And GDPR is all around data deletion, identifying your sensitive data. Where is it? Is it in emails, is it phone numbers, addresses? What have you written down? I talked about profiling. I believe that feeds very much into the GDPR regulations. I don't think anybody's going to prosecute it because it needs to be done, and of course sponsored by the government. But there's a couple of things we haven't done, like for example, like opt-in. When you go to a website, particularly in Germany, you need to do a double opt-in. So you're agreeing and then you're agreeing afterwards to verify that you agree. None of that has really been done in this because everybody was doing everything pretty quickly. Nobody had a chance to do an extended due diligence on these. We do have another big security thing coming up that came up in the last month. Max Schrems, who's the Austrian lawyer who was the cause of all the GDPR, had a recent case come up in the European Court, which has invalidated the Privacy Shield, which is the replacement for Safe Harbor, which is around the data security between transfers between the EU and the US. So this, for the next couple of months, will be a big part of security. If any of you are out of a job looking for some consultancy work, I can definitely recommend doing a quick course on GDPR and working as a consultant into companies, because like GDPR, this is going to apply to every company in Europe. Every company is going to have to redo a lot of the work that was done for GDPR. A lot of it will be done by lawyers, but for lawyers who aren't that good at contracts, it will be around redoing contracts through the supply chain and doing agreements with your vendors. So your vendors are possibly not based in Germany. My vendors could be based in India and in Sri Lanka and in Romania. And as I said, in Brazil, so that we have this follow the sun model. So I need to make sure that all of my contracts with them, and even though they're not owned by, or they're not directly employed by my company, I have a contract with them. And because I have a contract with them, I'm responsible for any data that they have from my company on my customers. So this is one of the key tenets of GDPR. So I have to know that data is secure. So even though this Schrems EU, US, I know I'm probably a little bit too much about this one now, but it is quite interesting because it will be a bonus for security people. It will ensure that we're one of the growth industries in the next while. We already have work to do. This is kind of going back to the beginning. One thing that the COVID thing did, it showed, I mean, crisis management is an old thing in telco anyway. You always look at well, what are your threats? Where's the problems? What happens if your fire alarms don't go off? What happens if there's I know in Ghana we used to have this interesting little challenge where every rainy season our data center would flood. And our data center would have about that much water at the base of all of the servers. And nothing went. It was so used to this area of chaos, and nothing actually got busted, and nothing went on fire. You have no idea how. So crisis management, looking at all of that, going back to the old school ways of evaluation of what we need to do, there will be a bit of work to do with that, and as well having to update all those old kind of processes to address this new cloud connected world in the future. So this is going back to Cloudflare again, just looking at some of the solutions that people were using. They were going out and finding as much free as possible, and also looking at the contracts with people like Microsoft and what they could eat of that contract. This is quite interesting. Since Cloudflare actually saw since January like an increase of 30,000% in phishing attacks, malicious websites and malware, all related to COVID. They blocked 1,200 such attacks in January, and they saw 1,200 in January, and in March they saw 380,000 attacks with the COVID theme. And Cloudflare are one of the world leading companies at web filtering, based in Portugal, but mainly in the US. So criminals didn't take a break. All of the security problems that were happening before were there, and people were so much on site. There was a lot of people were desperately looking for VPN solutions if they didn't have them before. And the problem with looking for stuff for free, I did a lot of research into free antivirus before, and if you see free antivirus, if it's not from a named vendor like the Symantec, on the Symantec not anymore, maybe like the McAfee's or the Kaspersky's, if it's just this is a free antivirus, it's a pretty good sign that it's infected to all hell with everything going. And I think we saw the same thing with VPN sites. Anything that came up as a VPN test or VPN free, you were pretty much guaranteed that it was infected with some kind of dropper from a botnet. One of the really key things that I saw in video conferencing, there was this lovely idea of, this came out of the Zoom bombing, and this came from a US company. I don't know how many people have seen this one, that there's a hire a llama. So you could stick one into your corporate Zoom meeting or video conference call for $100. So I liked this as one of the more inventive ideas for video conferencing, and also keeping people happy as well. And I will leave it there because I don't want to use any more time.
Thank you for the talk. And I know it's a very big topic, so it is always a lot of different things we can discuss here. There are a lot of challenges to be thought about.
So all my LinkedIn details are there. So my name is Clodagh Durkan. So this is my play site as well. I have a play site. You can have a look at it.
Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for your time. And see you next time.